everyone. This is Essays and Espresso. This is the first episode of our new podcast, and I am joined by my two co-hosts, Boke and Jima. How are you?
I'm doing wonderfully fine, thank you.
And Acer Aesthetics. What's up?
Everything's great over here.
Awesome. So today we're going to be discussing a number of topics. We're going to be first talking about just stuff that we've been up to recently. But we're also going to have a essay question. Basically, we're going to be diving deep into the idea behind a polished turd versus a flawed masterpiece, and kind of what our thoughts and feelings are. And this is going to be a pretty consistent part of the show. We're going to try and come up with like interesting topics for each episode and try to dive into them as much as we can, and kind of exhaust it to where we feel like we've discussed it to a reasonable end. I hope you enjoy this first episode. We're going to try and make this a bi-weekly podcast if we can. We're not going to make any promises, but we're going to do our best, and hopefully you guys dig it. So we're going to start off by talking about, stuff that we've been doing recently. So, Boken, why don't you start off? What have you been up to, man?
Sure. I want to start off talking about a game that I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with it, but it's called Return of the Obra Dinn.
What the fuck is that?
Yeah, it's a mouthful, isn't it? It's made by the Return of the Obra Dinn.
Okay.
Maybe pronounce it differently, I don't know. It's made by the guy who made Papers, Please.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's this new game, just came out, I think.
I haven't played Papers, Please personally, but I've seen enough videos on it.
Yeah, I mean, if you've seen gameplay, you probably can guess what it's like.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, it's just one of those games that, like, people just love to talk about. It's like one of those games that just people... I guess because it's so unique and it just came out of nowhere and people were just like, holy crap, this is so cool, I want to talk about it.
Exactly, and just what you just said, it's unique and it came out of nowhere. That's exactly the same with, for me at least, with Return of the Obra Dinn.
Okay.
It's very different, I would say. I mean, I haven't played much of Papers, Please, mostly because I'm fucking terrible at it. Like, you basically have this one screen and you have to look at all the information and check it in a certain amount of time and see if there's any errors in, like, the papers.
It's a nightmare.
And I was just bad at it.
It's a nightmare of spatial reasoning. There's so much stuff you have to do.
It made me realize I should not work for any, like, government agency or something. But Return of the Obra Dinn is about you're an insurance agent, I think, and you go to this abandoned ship that appeared out of nowhere, like it was lost for a long time, and you go back to it, and for some reason you have a magical watch in your inventory that allows you to go up to a corpse and relive their last memories. The moment they died, basically. And so you go up to a corpse and takes you into another dimension, I guess, or something, and you hear a little soundbite of what the people have been saying at the time. So, for example, the first corpse is, Captain, open the door, and then you just hear a door opening and a gunshot. And then it flashes to a still image of that scene playing out, and you see someone, who opened the door and is shooting the guy right next to you, and then you have to figure out what the fuck happened and why. So you have 60 deaths, I think, to solve, because the list of the crew is 60 people. And you have to go into these individual scenes, run around, look at the people, and tell who is that person, how did he die, and if he was killed by whom. And that is the entire game. And it is fucking brilliant. Like, I've never played anything like this. I'm not sure if I'm explaining it properly. But the idea is that it's puzzles. Like you have to be aware of who might that person be. Then you have to check like who was on the passenger list, who might be the captain, and like you have to pick up on very subtle details in the scene. So, for example, if you hear two voices, then you have to figure out who said what from their posture or how they're talking to each other and all that shit.
So is it like a point-and-click adventure type of game?
It's more a puzzle game. It's not really point and click because you're not interacting with anything except the corpses that are lying around.
Weird. I think I've seen footage of this game. Like, it has like a monochrome.
Yeah.
Okay.
It looks like it has like a very grainy old, I don't know, CRT monitor? Or maybe even older. Like, you can actually choose what kind of monitor you want to emulate, and it's all like really old shit, like a Commodore and all that.
Yeah, I was gonna say it almost looked like a Game Boy game in a way, but like obviously much more than what the Game Boy was capable of. But like it had kind of aesthetic.
Yeah, and it's only 2 colors, or 1 color and 2 different gradients, I guess.
And is it in 3D? Is it a 2D game? I'm not.
It's 3D. You can walk around in every death scene or every memory in 3D, and you like that's also part of the puzzle appeal. Is you hear someone getting murdered, and then you flash to a scene where that person is crawling away with a knife in his back, and you don't even know exactly who the person in the room was that actually killed him. And then you can go outside of the room and on the top deck, and there are completely other people standing around, and you can look at them, how they are interacting, and then figure out who might these people be. Like if they're on top of the deck, then they should be part of what they call the seamen. That's a rank on the ship. And then there's a lower class that is mostly below deck. And you have like a glossary that tells you all that information, and you have to figure out who is who looks like an admiral, who might be the first mate and all that. I don't know, I found it weirdly absorbing and just extremely unique because I've never seen such a gameplay loop before, you know?
See,
and it's also yeah?
No, I was going to say, like, you know, even though I haven't played the game, like, it's games like that make me realize that there's so much untapped potential in the medium. And if people just, like, were willing to think out the box a little bit or, like, not play it safe all the time, we could have like really unique experiences like this more often, because there's so much that can be done that still hasn't been done yet.
Yeah, it's an auteur game, as they say. Someone who had an actual vision, who like wasn't afraid to take risks, and who didn't have any suits, I guess, behind his back, who told him, no, that's not gonna sell. What are you doing? You know, he just did what he wanted to do, and that's like also the game is really focused in that way. It has only that one idea, and it executes that idea to pretty much perfection, because it obviously gets harder and harder to figure out what happened in every scene. And then once you solved it a few hours later and the idea is basically explored, then it's over, and then you can move on with your life. And that's, I don't know, I like games that don't go on forever and actually have an ending. And it feels satisfying to reach it.
You're really selling me on this game. I'm gonna try it.
Is this
yeah, you should.
Is a PC game?
It's on Steam. I'm not sure if it's on any other consoles. Probably not, because I think Papers, Please was also PC only.
Right. Okay. That's really cool. Now,
yeah.
Hold on a second though, before you move on to whatever other bullshit, because you've seen Daredevil Season 3. We're talking about that.
I was going to talk about that.
Good. So, because I fucking love Daredevil Season 3. So, you know, how do you feel about it?
I thought it was fucking excellent.
Yeah, boy.
I've spent a lot of time recently just marching through all the Marvel seasons I missed in general, on Netflix anyway.
Oh, God.
Like
Why'd you do that?
Because I like them all. Why not?
Even the bad ones.
I mean, even the bad ones I like, because I've really grown to like these characters overall. Luke Cage, Iron Fist, like their shows have been cancelled after these seasons now, and I still enjoyed them a hell of a lot. And I think people are kind of unfair to them. But yeah, Daredevil Season 3 is pretty much above most of the Marvel shows anyway.
I know you and I don't agree on Punisher.
Yeah,
I
that's
thought
one.
Punisher kind of sucked.
But okay, so let's go to Daredevil.
Okay.
What I really enjoyed about the season is that the villain is one of the most intimidating villains I've ever seen in a superhero show.
Yeah,
And that is
Poindexter.
precisely because... No, not Poindexter. I mean Fisk.
Okay.
And I mean Fisk specifically because he never actually does anything. He is only in his room. He lets other people do his work. And he still comes out on top every time. And I found that really well written. Like the characters at some point actually fall into despair and go, I don't know what to do. This guy is too smart, and he's always 3 steps ahead of us. And that felt incredibly earned to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I remember a friend of mine was criticizing the show, saying that Fisk seemed a little too OP, and that, like, how is it that he was able to accomplish this, under the supervision of the FBI? But my counter to that would be, it's specifically because that he was, like, in there, that he was able to infiltrate them in such a way. He was able to learn all their secrets. He was able to figure out, because he is very intelligent, so he was able to kind of carve his own little, niche, I guess you could say, in there, and then just spread his influence. And I think it was done in a way that made sense, because it wasn't just him by himself in there. He also had his confidants that he was able to lean on in order to figure out what was going on outside of his little prison.
And that's what great leaders do, right? They know what other people they can trust to do their work for them.
Yes, including Poindexter, who I loved. I loved his character, because the way that they built him up, and the way that they explained his character, and the way that they just thoroughly fleshed him out, and just really did a good job selling you on, like, he's not mentally well, but he's, like, trying really hard to kind of create this artificial like veil of normalcy, when in actuality he's just, like, really messed up.
Yeah.
And, like, and it wasn't until they started, like, really showing you how just kind of bonkers he is. Like, I didn't even realize it. Like, it didn't even register to me for that character that he was like that, until they started really just like, no, this is all his backstory. And I was just like, holy crap. Which is also, like, one of the best directed episodes, I would say. Like, just the way that was shot.
Where Filson goes into, where Fisk goes into the memories.
Yeah, I thought that was shot excellently.
Yeah.
It kind of made it stand out, though.
Even before that, there's this, in my opinion, the best sequence in the entire season, or the best moment, I guess, when he goes to the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist tells him, we need to know that you're mentally stable. Do you have someone to talk to? And he tells him, yes, I have a girlfriend, and she's, like, working in a bar, and she's really nice and all that. And then one scene later, they cut to him waiting in a car, and you see how the girl comes out of the bar, and you expect that the girl will enter his car and they will talk, but she just moves right by him because she doesn't even know him, and he's just fucking stalking on her in the middle of the night with binoculars, looking at what she's ordering at a pizza place.
Yes.
It was so fucking creepy.
I know, the way that, like, the way that he spoke with her when he finally got a chance to was so uncomfortable, because he knew so much about her.
Yeah.
It was just like it was so bizarre. But man, see, that's what I'm talking about, though, with that character, where, like, if you don't delve deeper, like, if you, like, let's say, like, you and I knew him in real life, and we just kind of spoke to him as an acquaintance and just kind of left it at that, he would appear as, like, a completely normal kind of guy. You wouldn't think anything of him. And it's only until that kind of veil is lifted when you start to realize just how fucked he is.
There's one point I want to make, because I like all these shows so much. And I'm not sure if I'm the only one who also enjoys like the lesser shows of Iron Fist and all that. But there's a problem with the Marvel Netflix shows that a lot of people hate, that the first half is always really good, and then at season 8 or something, it keeps petering out and it keeps getting worse. That happened in Jessica Jones season 1, that happened in Daredevil season 2, it happened in Luke Cage season 1. And I think now in the later Marvel Netflix shows, actually the shows are, or the seasons are generally become more even. You know, the themes are being pulled through. They are, I think the seasons are better thought through now than they were before. And in Daredevil season 3, that was just, I don't know, it was immediately clear to me, because there's this theme of vulnerability, and they have that for, you know, I don't want to be vulnerable because I have friends. That's for Daredevil. And then he tries to go against that, and it doesn't work. And then he comes to a character arc. And the same thing happens with Poindexter, who is vulnerable because of his mental instability. And they explore that better. And at the end, everyone is at a different point.
And you could also argue that while Fisk is arguably vulnerable in his own sense, he also exploits other people's vulnerabilities.
Exactly. And I mean, I don't want to spoil the ending, but yeah, Fisk is specifically vulnerable in the last episode, and that is what leads to the conclusion.
Yes.
You know?
Cool. I'll give it a watch.
It's good stuff.
Yeah. I think you can just watch Daredevil on its own. I really like Jessica Jones. I probably like her more than Daredevil, just as a
character?
Yeah, as a character. The actress is fantastic.
Yeah, the actress is pretty great.
Yeah.
She's the girl who died on Breaking Bad, right?
Yes.
Yes. She's pretty
Kristen
good.
Ritter.
Kristen Ritter.
All right. Is there anything else?
Nope. That's it for me for now.
All right. What about you, Acer?
What have I been doing? Well, I started watching Baki, the Netflix anime.
Baki the Grappler, or is that unrelated?
Yeah, Baki the Grappler, and I'm enjoying it, but it's super dumb, and I'm thinking I'm gonna give it a few more episodes, and I might drop it because I don't know if it's building up to anything great. But the premise I really like. But what were you gonna say?
Is that because I think it may be the same thing? I'm not sure, but is that the same show where there's like an earthquake going on, and the guy like punches the ground to stop it, and he's like, "No interruptions."
It might be. But basically, I like the idea that it's just okay. So people who don't know, it's martial artists who are fighting with these different styles, and it's anime craziness, but it's also kind of grounded. So where you have this guy who can basically cut anything with the tip of his fingers because of the way he forms a fist, and all sort of stuff like that. That really interests me, but I don't know if it gets much better.
But what is the problem? Are the characters not good, or the action?
Yeah, well, it's just it feels like it's kind of meandering. I really wanted to get going to do something with it. You know how typical shonen anime, they have like, this is the beginning of the arc, and here are the villains of this arc, and this is sort of, we're setting up all the fights, and these are the characters who are going to face off against one another. One problem I have is that I think none of these characters are like exceptionally charismatic in any way. It's like there's no equivalent of JoJo's Dio, for example. A lot of bland characters. And the other issue is that I've been watching it late at night, so I fall asleep over them. So I'm not quite sure if I know what's going on, or if there is nothing going on.
I mean, it's pretty bad if you're like falling asleep watching them.
I did that with JoJo season 1, and that was great.
Well, JoJo's, well, you mean Phantom Blood?
Yeah, Phantom Blood.
Oh, Phantom Blood is not the best one.
Oh, no, it's not.
I mean, if you were going to sleep on one of them, Phantom Blood's not not the worst one.
Just doze out during those middle episodes. It'll be good. But other than that, I recently got back into YuGiOh a few months ago. I dropped out.
Oh my god.
Do you guys know anything about YuGiOh?
No.
No.
Yes, I've played the card game online. Just a bit.
Okay, but you're not like you have no familiarities with like the tournament players and all of that.
Oh, I mean, I watched it as a kid.
Well, I mean like tournaments in the real world where people are doing
no.
degenerate stuff.
No idea.
Okay,
You
so
mean
I'm not
these
gonna...
are people that don't go to the Shadow Realm?
Yeah.
Those are the people that get bullied out of Magic tournaments, right?
Stop bullying me, guys. I'm trying to talk about this. So I dropped out of YuGiOh right around the beginning of Master Rule 2, and we're at Master Rule 4 now. And this is the worst competitive YuGiOh has ever been. We have people... Now, okay, do you know what... Like, could you imagine you're playing Magic the Gathering, and you play one card out of hand, and you just combo with that card until you get a first turn victory. We have like 5 of those going on in YuGiOh right now. The competitive scene is disastrous, and the most broken card in the game, Firewall Dragon, Konami refuses to actually ban it because it's also the main card of the guy in the anime.
Oh no. That sounds great.
It is pretty great. Casual YuGiOh, however, is pretty good. It's getting better. So
like casual because people make their own rules?
not casual because like nobody cares about tournaments. You can play cards which don't afford you any advantage just because you like them. You don't need to buy $120 decks. Like the new Thunder Dragon decks, those are selling for like $300+ bucks. It's insanity. But casual YuGiOh, that's just like, oh yeah, we're just friends. Let's play with these decks.
See, I would just make my own competition and I would make my own tournaments. Find people who want to come and, have, I don't know, house parties or whatever and just make house rules that ban obviously dumb cards.
Yeah. Konami has a ban list, but it's so weird. They go about banning cards in such a weird way.
No one can use Karibo.
Why is the
That's
dragon
a
so
thing,
dumb
cool.
anyway? What does he do?
What is...
The firewall dragon or whatever it's called.
Well, the first thing about him is that they created a new summoning mechanic, which must supersede all other extra deck summoning mechanics. And the problem with Firewall Dragon, number 1, he is extremely generic. Like, you pretty much play any deck, you can summon him in your first turn. And he allows you to summon so many more cards. He allows you to... he doesn't really do it, but you can bounce him with other cards, and you can just do it so often. He doesn't have a once per turn limitation. And you can basically just fill your field with monsters, then summon something like Cannon Soldier, and just sacrifice all of your monsters to deal 20,000 damage to your opponent and win. Another one is Armageddon Knight Isolde, and it's just a mess. I'm really interested in seeing where the game goes, though. Konami.
Is Exodia still a thing?
Yeah, Exodia is still I mean, not competitively, but Exodia was never competitively viable.
Really? Okay. I was under the impression that just rushing to an Exodia was at some point a strategy that almost everyone used. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I mean, if there were no ban list, you can get Exodia turn 1 because you could just cycle through your entire deck. But the problem with Exodia is that no piece of Exodia affords you any advantage in and of itself. You have to get all 5 of them. And if you draw 4 pieces in your first turn, and then you just draw 1 other card, you start with 5 cards, draw 4 pieces, you basically have to survive an entire round using only 1 card. So the best Exodia decks, they kind of want to get rid of Exodia from their hands until like turn 3, and then they can sort of add it without drawing into it, because they just lose a card that way.
I see.
I've also been exploring the sort of TCG trading card games, collectible card game mechanics. YuGiOh is such a broken disaster. But like you have cards like you have games like Magic the Gathering, where every player basically is the best player in the world because they all know like, okay, this is what this card does in terms of the mathematics of the whole thing. But YuGiOh just anything goes. But I don't want to bore people with YuGiOh talk because it's so. Also, I watched Arc V, the YuGiOh anime. Just quickly, one of the seasons is really good. The rest of them are very middling.
So only one good season.
Only one great season.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah, great.
The first season?
No, it's the synchro synchro dimension sequence. You know how it was advertised to me by my friends? Oh, you know that show you didn't like? Just watch until you're at like episode 40, and then it gets really good.
And but then it gets bad again.
Well, that's the thing. I watched until episode 40. I was mortified. Then it got kind of interesting. But then there was another 30 episodes until it got really good, so...
Jeez, I don't... No, I'm not doing that.
If anybody wants to watch YuGiOh, just watch 5D's Season 1.
Wait, is that the motorcycle one?
Yes, but...
Oh,
listen,
God.
Listen. Listen, though. That is genuinely a great piece of anime. No, I'm not joking.
But it's so dumb.
Really?
It is extremely dumb, but it totally works.
Okay, you know what? I'm not gonna judge because fucking if I describe some of the shows that I like and you don't have the context of actually watching it, you'd probably go, that sounds fucking dumb, but it's actually great. So you know what? I'm sure it's actually.
Didn't we do that already when you described Fate? Something for me.
Yeah, Fate, the Fate's franchise, basically. But I was trying to sell you on Fate Zero specifically, and I remember you were like, "That sounds fucking dumb," and I'm like, "No, it's really good."
Was that the one where they're reviving ancient fighters to fight each other and for something?
Yeah. So, oh boy, strap yourselves in, fellas. We're entering my world. So the Fate. I don't like to mess with like all the side stuff. Like there's like a friggin' gacha mobile game. I've not touched that. I don't want to touch that. I'm an OG fan. I care about like the visual novel and I care about the original timeline. I mean, timeline's a weird way to put it because it's already a multiverse, but whatever. Anyways, so yeah, the basic premise is that these characters they summon these heroic spirits of legend and myth. So you have Alexander the Great, as well as Guy de Rey or Diarmuid from like Celtic myth, and they all fight each other over the Holy Grail. Not the actual Holy Grail, not the Christian Holy Grail, but like it's more of like it's kind of hard to explain. It's like this omnipotent wish granting device, and they're all fighting over it because the heroic spirits, they want their own wishes fulfilled, and of course the masters that summon them, they want their wish granted as well. So they're all fighting for it, and it's super good. I promise you. I know it sounds complicated and dumb, but it's actually really fucking good, especially Fate Zero. Fate Zero is just great stuff. Give it a shot. It's only like 26 episodes. Unlike
that is the one that was written by the Madoka guy, right?
Technically, in a way. So the Fate Stay Night, the visual novel, was written by Kinoku Nasu, and Fate, like most of the events of Fate Zero, which is a prequel to Fate Stay Night, most of the events were already drummed up by him, but he got the writer of Madoka Magica to kind of take his ideas and to turn them into light novels. So yeah, technically the Madoka Magica guy wrote them, but it's kind of like a collaborative effort because they weren't all exclusively Kinoku Nasu's story beats. He did contribute. Like, Ryder's character was Urobuchi's creation, and Ryder's a fucking awesome character. I love Ryder. He's like one of my favorite characters in the entire Fate franchise. So kudos to him for that. But like, yeah, it's kind of like a collaborative effort between the two of them, So, and I know you love Madoka, so hopefully that gives you enough incentive to be like, all right, give it a shot. I think you'll like it.
I was planning on watching it anyway, but there's just so much other shit I still have to catch up on.
Well, it's only 26 episodes. It's not like freaking Acer here saying like, oh yeah, just get through 40 episodes and it'll get kind of good and then bad again.
Yeah, but there's 10 other 26 episode animes waiting for me right now. I mean, I've just this year started actually getting into seasonal anime, and I'm watching like Goblin Slayer, and I'm watching the new JoJo just to watch it. And just yesterday I started an anime about fucking archery for some reason because it looked interesting. And
so funny thing in Fate Zero, there is a character that is of the archer class, and he does not use a bow.
That's
what
stupid.
Do you mean? What do you mean class?
Okay, so each of the characters, each of the servants, when they are summoned, they're put in a class: Saber, Archer, Lancer, Caster, Berserker, Assassin. I think I'm missing one, and Lancer. And technically, those heroic spirits can encompass multiple classes, but usually they're the class that fits them the best. So, for example, Robin Hood obviously would be in the Archer class, so he would be summoned as Archer. Just to give an example. Yes.
I don't understand how that makes any sense. Like they're not in a video game.
What doesn't make sense about it?
So why do they need classes?
What?
You know what I mean? Like, can't they just use any weapon?
Well,
can't they just do anything?
Well, because it has to correspond with their legend. They can't just do anything, because what sense would it make for Robin Hood to be like wielding a battle axe? His legend states that he was like this great archer, so he's going to be summoned as an archer.
But a class for me is a defined category of something. So why is like, okay, with Robin Hood, when he's summoned, could he not learn to use another weapon?
I mean, technically, I guess. But see, the thing is, there's also like these rules set in place. So, and each of them have their own abilities, and they have like class-related abilities as well. So, like the Archer class, for example, has this innate ability where they don't have to be connected to their master in order to like do some scouting, for example. So it's kind of complicated.
One day we should do an episode on dumb things that are actually good.
Sure, why not?
Trying to think of what I would introduce there.
I'll talk more about YuGiOh then.
Just fucking watch it, all right? It's better than Goblin Slayer, all right? It's just stop watching Goblin Slayer, watch this instead.
No, I'm not See, I don't stop watching shows just because they're bad. Okay.
You're one of those. Okay.
Yes.
All right. I see how it is.
I value being informed, even about shit.
I only do that when I feel this desire to just say like, no, I need to see this through to the end, see why other people like it. Like Elfen Lied, for example. I finished that because I heard it was good, and I thought it was like one of the worst things I'd ever seen. I finished it, and I was just like, no, how could I don't get it. I don't understand. Why do people praise this? This show is the worst.
What about that time where those boys killed that dog?
Trash. Utter
What about
trash.
wasn't there like a girl with pink hair who was killed by like a guy who had a bunch of guns? Am I remembering that?
I don't need like. It's been a few years since I've seen it. I think I know what you're talking about.
Like there were two girls with pink hair. There was the older one and the younger one.
Yeah, Lucy, and I forget the name of the other one.
Which one's Lucy?
Lucy is the main girl. She's the one with the.
She's the Elven Light.
Yeah, she's the main character basically.
What's Goblin Slayer about?
Tell us about Goblin Slayer.
It's incredibly mediocre, and I don't get why so many people are watching it.
It's because of the controversy.
But the controversy stopped after the intro of the first episode. There hasn't been anything controversial since. It's now just a generic medieval anime.
What controversy?
There's a rape scene, and wait, it's not actually. Is it the intro? There's just, it starts out and some dumb kid adventurers go into a cave to slay some goblins. And then they get, one of them gets killed and the other two girls get raped by the goblins. And that shit blew up on social media because people were outraged about it. And then people were outraged about people being outraged, as it always goes. And since then, there is a sort of trigger warning, I guess, at the start of every episode. Like, if you're faint of heart or something, you shouldn't be watching this, and this is graphic, whatever.
Wait a minute. Why doesn't Berserk blow up in that sense? It's full of controversies.
I think the argument is that in Berserk, yes, it has shocking content, but that the content has substance behind it. Therefore, it's not done for shock value.
Yes.
Where with Goblin Slayer, the people are saying that it's just there just for the sake of shocking people, and it has no substance other than that. I mean, I don't think that. I think some people, it's just because it's rape and they're just being sensitive, but there might be some merit to that claim. I don't know. I haven't watched it.
I know those Castlevania guys were talking about wanting to do Berserk, right? But that's never gonna happen.
Probably not.
But see, you're not the first person to bring up Berserk in this context. Goblin Slayer really, it isn't that graphic all in all. It's kind of dark, and that's pretty much it. I don't know. It's so borderline uninteresting. I barely have anything to say because the only thing that really sticks out in that show is the fact that the main character is kind of like a weirdo who's really into slaying goblins. And the people around him actually acknowledge how weird that is. Because there are it's about basically a guild of adventurers, and you rise up in their ranks, and as you rise up, you can do better contracts, kill higher monsters, and, help out, people of nobility and all that shit. And he's way past killing goblins. But for some reason, he still takes every fucking goblin contract that gets posted in the guild. And the adventurers around him acknowledge how dumb that is. And they sometimes think he's sexually aroused by killing goblins or something. And that is sometimes played up for comedy. And that is the only part I genuinely enjoy about that show.
I see.
Yeah, and that's it. Now there's an elf and a lizard man and a dwarf. And they all can do some spells and they fight monsters. And Goblin Slayer is a weird mute. Well, he's not mute, but he's a social outcast.
I gotta say real quick, I think the controversy is pretty much just because there's rape, because Akame Got Kill was an anime that came out a couple of years ago. Terrible anime. I don't recommend it. But it was super edgy, just over the top, bloody characters just dying left and right all the time. But there really wasn't that much of a stink about it. And I think it's because it didn't have rape, although apparently the manga does later on. But, since that part of the manga wasn't adapted in the anime, there wasn't a controversy about it, I guess. But Oh, that show was also really bad. It was so stupid. Just the worst. So I think with Goblin Slayer, it's less like the blood and the gore, and it's pretty much the rape, I think.
But there was one scene.
It's enough. It's enough for people to go nuts.
People read an article saying, they read a review saying, oh, there's a rape in this. And then somebody just reads that line and they say, this anime advocates rape. And then that blows up. And people who don't know anything about it start talking.
That's true.
YuGiOh should do a rape scene. Then everyone would. Obviously, I'm joking. You know they transformed the guy's motorcycle from 5Ds into a card? It's crazy.
Wait. What?
Yeah. They transformed it into a monster just recently.
Oh, I thought you meant that the vehicle itself turned into a physical card.
No, but you know what happens in YuGiOh Arc 5? A guy and his vehicle, they merge together in the middle of a duel. And it's great. That's in the good season, by the way.
Wow.
That's in the good season, I see. Because I remember watching Yu-Gi-Oh! Where Joey Wheeler was suddenly wielding battle armor. And he was himself a monster, but also a player.
Lord
that made no sense whatsoever.
During the Seal of Orichalcos. That stuff wasn't in the manga, even. I think I've exposed a side of myself the world didn't need to know.
It is too late now.
You can't go back.
Oh, shit.
Right. Is that it? Or...
Yeah, well, have you been watching anything? Doing anything?
Yes. So, despite the fact that I'm a huge dumb weeb, I haven't done anything weeby recently. I watched Mindhunter, which was awesome. Mindhunter is fantastic. It's basically a show about back in the 70s, people...
The FBI.
Yeah, the FBI came up with the term serial killer for the first time. And it was basically a new thing, right? Like, because beforehand, people were looked at like criminals as more like black and white and like, oh, they were just born bad, right? And that was around the time when people started realizing that there was more to it than that, and that what was actually happening is that sociopaths were being born because what a psychopath is someone that was born a certain way. A sociopath they were born normal, but there was something about their upbringing, something about their environment that changed their behavior. And when you examine people like Michael Myers, he had like a very disturbed upbringing where like he was being beaten and he was sexually molested, just like a whole bunch of like awful things happened to him. And then it was like, yeah, of course he turned out to be a freaking serial killer because his upbringing was so bad. But at the time, people didn't take that into consideration. They just assumed he was just born bad. And Mindhunter shows us through some dramatic lens, a dramatized depiction of what these FBI agents went through in order to like start figuring out like what these serial killers were thinking when they were going on their killing sprees. And they would interview people like Ed Kemper, who was dubbed the co-ed killer. And the FBI agent Holden interviews him, asking a bunch of questions, trying to like get an idea of like, what's up with you? What happened? Because he seems normal, but yet he's done these horrific things.
He also seems incredibly intelligent.
Yes.
And super friendly, wasn't he?
Very friendly.
Yeah. So we've all seen it?
I've seen the first few episodes.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen the entire thing. It's really well done. Like it's I don't know how historic it is, I guess.
I will say,
but
I will at least say that the girlfriend is totally fictitious.
The hippie.
Yes, she's not real.
The hippie.
But
She's a social scientist, not a hippie.
she's kind of a hippie.
All the social scientists are hippies.
I will say that even though she's technically like not real, I think she does serve a purpose in the story, which is to kind of humanize Holden, because I think without her, Holden would just seem like this really focused, just like borderline obsessed. And he does come across like that regardless, but I think she serves as kind of like a good counterbalance, so he seems more relatable. Because I think otherwise he would just seem like this totally obsessed, like FBI agent that just wants to learn about these serial killers and like totally absorb himself into that.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I still get why he's so into it, though. And I mean, that's pretty much the plot of the first season.
Yes.
That even the two FBI agents start falling out because the one guy is more normal than Holden, and he's kind of starting to question if they aren't giving these psychopathic killers a platform.
Yes. I think the show's great. I don't want to say too much more because I don't want to spoil anything in case anyone wants to see it, but yeah.
It was made by David Fincher, wasn't it?
Yes.
Everything he does is great.
I haven't seen too much of his work, but I loved Seven and I loved Fight Club.
Zodiac.
No, I haven't seen it.
So good. It's such a good movie. If you liked Mindhunter, you'll definitely like Zodiac. Very similar.
Well, damn, I guess I gotta see it now.
Yes.
Okay, now, I've also just recently beaten Horizon Zero Dawn. And it was pretty okay. It was pretty good. Not bad. Not great, but, I enjoyed it for what it was. It did kind of mark a very distinct flaw I find with a lot of open world games, and that is the fact that most of them treat traversal as kind of just a matter-of-fact thing, and none of them try to really innovate on it. Because that game pretty much makes you fast travel everywhere. That, or you can ride one of the mechs as like a horse, kind of, and that's fine, but traversal's not very fun. And when you have a world as big as Horizon Zero Dawn's, the fact that traversal itself isn't very enjoyable, I think, is a huge problem. Now, I'm not sure how they would have improved it because she's a normal person, right? I guess maybe they could have made it so that, maybe she can take over some of the flying robots and she can fly around, and maybe that. But then, I don't know, I guess that would create other issues. I'm not sure. But I just find that with a lot of like open world games, traversal is just boring. But that aside, I did think it was a pretty unique game. And even though it has a lot of like the typical trappings of these AAA, quote-unquote AAA games, like, it's got crafting, it's an open world game, it's got tacked on skill trees, and blah, blah, blah. Despite all of these like really typical like gaming conventions, I think it still manages to be pretty unique, particularly in the world building, because the game has some really interesting designs, like I think the enemies themselves being like robot animals and dinosaurs, like that's super cool. But also just the culture of the characters, of the different tribes, I think is really neat. Like, because they have this like weird mysticism about robots and machinery and technology. And from their perspective, like, you could totally get it of like, yeah, to them it's like this weird, otherworldly stuff that's totally beyond their comprehension. So of course they'd kind of worship it as if it was something like mythical, when it's not. It's just technology. And I think that's really interesting. It's a little like annoying sometimes too, because like, you'll see a character that's like, that treats an AI as like a spirit, and that's just a freaking computer. But it's still interesting of like, yeah, you can understand why the character would think that way. So then the story and the writing in general was a lot better than I expected. I didn't think it was great per se. I think there's some really stupid plot contrivances towards the beginning of the game especially, but I think some of the reveals, especially in terms of how they flesh out the world building later on and they reveal the backstory of, how things turned out the way it did, was actually pretty interesting. I did think there were a few issues, like particularly, I'm not going to go into any detail, but I think particularly in how they explain why things turned out as bad as it did was a little, I think it needed some more work. I don't think it was as well explained as it could have been, or at least as well fleshed out as it could have been. But, whatever. It's still pretty unique stuff as a whole. So, overall, I think it's a pretty decent game. I think it was pretty fun. And I'd say to give it a shot if you see it on sale.
How long is it?
That depends, because there is...
Too long.
I mean, if you want to do the main story, it will probably only take you like 20, 30 hours.
Oof.
But if you want to do the side quests and the DLC, it's probably going to be more like 60 hours or something like that.
Jesus. That's a lot.
Yep. It's a big game.
Come on, man. You did like 6-hour videos on YouTube.
That's true.
That is true. That is true.
Could have spent all that time on Horizon Zero Dawn.
See,
better bang for my buck.
Yeah. The thing is, though, this is one of those games, I like to call them, this is my own, like, personal term, but I call them alpha wave games, where I don't give them my full attention, where I will just play them and I will put, like, let's say a new album came out, I'll listen to that while I play it, or I'll listen to a podcast while I play it. I don't give it my undivided attention because I don't think that there's enough there for me to, like, be like, oh yeah, I want to get fully immersed. So I feel like if you're like me and you like playing games like that, it's good for that. Because sometimes I'm in the mood for something like that where I don't want to give something my 100% undivided attention. I just want to kick back, relax, hit some stuff while I listen to some prog metal.
See, that's interesting because I also have those games, and I usually just call them my podcast games or my let me watch Gilmore Girls on the side games. But
Gilmore Girls?
Yeah, man, I started watching that recently. I haven't watched that since I was like 14 or something, and it's really good. It's a good show.
See, here's the thing with me, like, I can never do that with a show. Like, even if it's a dumb show that, like, I shouldn't give my full attention to, whenever I watch a movie or whenever I watch a TV show, I always feel obligated to, like, no, turn off my phone, don't have anything. I need to give it my full attention.
Yeah, but there are certain shows that I think work as a sideshow, like, especially that stuff that isn't very visual and it's mostly dialogue, like a sitcom. Gilmore Girls is a lot of dialogue, like these people talk extremely fast and they're funny, but you don't have to look at every angle and every shot to get what's going on. It's more about the characters itself. But the thing is, when I watch a show on the side to a game, the game I'm playing is something that has a lot of routine and a lot of grinding. So Monster Hunter, for example.
Right.
That is a show that doesn't need my attention at all times. And from a game like Horizon Zero Dawn, I would wish that it's engaging enough, because it's a single-player game with a focused campaign, that it has enough for me to not get boring and routine,
Mm-hmm. No.
If I'm just sitting there and doing checkmark work on the same side quests over and over, then I think the game itself failed. Whereas something like Path of Exile, for example, or Diablo, if I have to grind there and the grind doesn't need my full attention, then that's perfectly fine. I don't know. Doesn't sound good to me.
No, I hear you. I hear you. But personally, I don't necessarily mark it against the game if I find myself doing that, because I'm still enjoying it just in a different way.
Well, I guess we can talk about exactly those types of games a bit more in our essay question.
We will, But first, let's have a quick break. All right, everyone, we're back. And it's time for us to sip some espresso and get our essays ready. It's time for the essay question. And this time we're going to be talking about polished turds versus flawed masterpieces. So I believe this is something that Boken, you really wanted to talk about. So why don't you lead us on?
It is. How do I lead this on? See, it's actually kind of easy because we talked about Return of the Obra Dinn and we talked about Horizon Zero Dawn, which is pretty much what, like, those two categories. I mean,
Okay.
I don't think Horizon Zero Dawn necessarily is a flawed turd, but it's for me the... I mean, I haven't played it, but it's I think it's like a lot of AAA games in the sense that I have no interest in playing it because it's so safe. Spider-Man would be another recent example.
Yeah,
Whereas
I get what you're saying.
Something like Return of the Obra Dinn is short and it's unique and it's going to stick with me way more than, 50 side missions of a Spider-Man world.
Catch this pigeon, follow this car.
Yeah.
Do those 30 times each.
No,
And it's become just incredibly... I don't know, the AAA games have become incredibly boring to me for years now, where I've stopped playing them altogether because every time I pick one up, it's just, it's fine. It's just fine. And it takes 40 hours of my life that I could spend on way better games.
There's also an issue I notice with it, which is just, there's more of this, where all these games are sort of converging and no one is really doing anything different anymore.
I remember someone pointing out in an article that God of War, Horizon Zero Dawn, Spider-Man, they are all or at least pseudo open world games with crafting and skill trees. And
Yep.
and it's like at first when I first think of those games, I'm like, they're all completely different. There's no way you could compare them. But like when laid out like that, it's like, yeah, there are some commonalities between them, which have become kind of the structure of like a lot of AAA games, where they just have these hard coded like parallels. And while I don't think it's totally fair to say like, oh, because the article was also trying to like insinuate like, oh, Sony is just making the same game over and over again. I don't think that's quite fair to claim. Those are still three very different games, and they fill in each of their like differences like very just they're just extremely different games aside from those commonalities is what I'm trying to say.
I don't think they're that different though. I think they seem more different because a lot of the gaming press and a lot of like just people who play games pick up those games and nothing else. So they focus on the differences because the rest is known, Like they focus on the little details of God of War that make it different from something like Spider-Man. But I mean, there's nothing more to say about the general open world structure of Spider-Man, Assassin's Creed, Tomb Raider, God of War that hasn't already been said. It's just reiterating some points and then going into how these games are slightly different.
Well, I'd say that the open world in God of War is very different from Spider-Man. Spider-Man's you're just exploring a city, and the God of War's world, it feels a little bit more like, not quite Dark Souls. It's not nearly as well designed or as intricate as Dark Souls, but it feels closer to that than it would the open world in Spider-Man, if you get what I'm saying.
Did either one of you ever read Chris Crawford's book on interactive storytelling?
No.
No.
I don't know if it was in that book where he made the point, but he has made the point that, and I think this sort of speaks to what we're talking about, a lot of mainstream games are about a character moving from point A to point B, Whereas not a lot of mainstream games are about how do we use interactivity to sort of delve into the character, to have them express themselves in ways you can't really do in other mediums. And when we were talking about how games are converging, or seem to be converging, I think that may actually just be what it is. It's everybody's trying to solve the problem of what can we do spatial simulation wise, what can we do with our game that gives it a unique identity as opposed to those other games. But we've seen so much of it before, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean they're trying to look at what can we do, but the structure has largely been defined, and they can't diverge from that because it's going to be unsafe and it's not going to sell, probably. So God of War has those bits where you have a companion, like you have in most of these games, and then at some point the companion goes haywire and he doesn't let himself be controlled anymore. And that's as little as they can do for the interactive storytelling in terms of actually like having mechanics that have a narrative impact.
Mm-hmm.
But it's never going to reach something that is as auteur-driven as a lot of really good indie games, in my opinion.
I agree. You have like we talked about Papers, Please earlier. That game doesn't have any movement, but it's really good, almost precisely because of that. Because it is so just. This is how cramped you are, and there is no way to play this game well because the game will just hammer you. And then there are all these little technicalities, and the game is so good.
Well, Papers, Please is very focused.
Yes, and you can't really replicate that when you also need to recoup $120 million budget and show off the flashy graphics, maybe.
Yeah, you have to have content, you have to have boss fights, you have to have good graphics, you have to have, Skinner box mechanics, XP systems, skill trees.
People need to keep coming back to it. We need to keep being able to advertise the other games, so you have systems in the game that bring them to the console store, that sort of stuff.
As someone that is a huge RPG nerd, I am honestly sick of so many games having XP systems where it's not necessary.
It's the worst.
Like, it's bad. Like, I'm actually happy that Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, is not going to have XP and leveling. And it looks like it's going for a more, like, character action approach, where you get like a currency and you just use that to like buy new moves and fighting styles. Like, that's fine. But like this desire to just slap stats on everything when it doesn't need to be there is just annoying.
Mm.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of polished turds do. They take one formula and then they play it out as best they can. But the innovation gets left behind most of the time.
Because, like, the thing about an RPG is, like, those stats mean something. So, like, it's a huge part of the game experience. For an RPG, it's the core of the experience. But for a lot of these other AAA games, it's a sauce. It's just something that they pour on top to just, like, make it more appetizing for people. But it's not something that's actually, like, integral to the game experience. It's just something that they just pour on top and just make people go like, see, look, we have your meaty steak and now we've put some A1 steak sauce on top just to make it that much more appetizing. When ideally it should be good enough on its own where it doesn't need it.
Mm.
And see, there are a few examples where, like, I wouldn't be as mad about the current state of AAA games if there weren't these standout games that buck those trends and are still fucking amazing and, in my opinion, better than pretty much everything. For example, Breath of the Wild, which doesn't have XP, which doesn't have really character progression outside of you gathering a better assortment of weapons, which can break at any point. It's completely different from the traditional open world structure.
You get more heart containers and stamina, but yes, I agree with that.
Yeah, but no skills,
Yeah.
You don't get permanently better in terms of damage output, for example.
Yeah, I
mean,
I think in terms of mechanics, it's kind of fucked. But I at least applaud them for like, hey, you didn't just do what everyone else is doing. You tried to do something different.
So you're what you have problems with Breath of the Wild in general?
No, I really like Breath of the Wild, but like I do think that the equipment system is kind of dumb.
Okay. Guess you didn't watch my video, huh?
I don't think I did, actually.
Oh, okay. That's fine. No, I have a video on that, why I think it's brilliant. But I guess I get that a lot of people don't like the equipment system and the durability. But I don't know, a lot of discussions around Breath of the Wild are people bringing up flaws that I don't want or can't dispute. But I still love it regardless because it's different. Because that's going to stick with me way more. And I don't know, I get why those design decisions are there. Whereas in something like Spider-Man, I don't get why there needs to be level ups and special abilities you unlock that aren't even balanced properly.
Honestly, like, my biggest problem with Spider-Man's like skill tree system is like a lot of that stuff is stuff that you should just know already. Like, there is a charge jump that you can learn through the skill tree, and I'm like, why don't I just have that? Like,
yeah.
Like, I understand to a certain extent, like, yeah, okay, you don't want to overload the player, so you dole out some of these skills, you know, as you play through the game. But did it really need to be a skill tree system? Like, what does that add to the game? It really doesn't. There's not any, like, thought. See, when I look at a skill tree, my brain should hurt. Like, I want a skill tree that when I look at it, I'm like, what the hell am I looking at? That's what I want. When I see like the pathetic skill tree in Spider-Man, I'm just like, what's the point? There needs to be, for me, I think a good skill tree is something that requires a certain degree of long-term planning. You need to be able to look at it and think, okay, I want to get this, but in order to do that, I need to do this, this, and that. And in order to get this, I need to do this, this, and that. And it gets your brain going. It makes you think like, all right, what should I do to start achieving these goals? There's none of that in the skill trees for like Spider-Man or Horizon Zero Dawn or like God of War. And in fact, what's worse about these games is that a lot of those abilities, not all of them, but a good deal of them are ones that you should already know. It's gotten to the point where like even like Metal Gear Rising, for example, you need to purchase the dodge button. Why?
What?
Really?
Yes. Like okay, I kind of get it. Like they want to, it's all about parries, right? Like the whole game is all about parries. But that doesn't mean you should make the fucking dodging something you purchase. Get out of here.
You can design the game differently to emphasize parries.
Yeah,
You don't have to limit the player from the start.
Yeah, I love Metal Gear Rising, but that was one design decision in particular where I just said, no, screw you guys. That's dumb.
Also, you should have to, you said long-term sort of planning.
Mm-hmm.
It should also reinforce how you play. Because, okay, I'm going to get this upgrade, which means I'm going to have to play the game like this, which means I'm probably not going to be getting these upgrades because they're not going to gel well together.
Yeah.
I like those systems.
I think
and
Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning has a really good skill tree system. It has like 3 different skill trees for rogue, warrior, and mage, and you can mix and match them if you want. And if you bought certain skills that you in hindsight realize, oh, they're pretty bad, you can actually respec and you can like start from scratch again, and you can like redistribute those points how you want. It's a really good system.
Yeah, and I mean that is the difference between when I play an RPG and a AAA game with an RPG system is I actually look at the last skills in every tree and I say to myself, is that what I want? Whereas because as you said, it takes planning to get there.
Yes.
And I have to limit myself. In most AAA games, you unlock the entire skill tree anyway. It's just slight differences in what you get first. And that's why the abilities themselves aren't that powerful. You know, they make you a little bit stronger, but not really that difference in play style. Like you could build in an actual RPG, you could build a party of 4 members and make them completely different. You couldn't make an RPG party with 4 Kratoses and have them be different.
Yeah, it's not specifically a skill tree, it's more just like a character progression system, but one of my absolute favorites is from Tales of Grace's F, where you have different titles that you earn throughout the game by doing like different things, like maybe using a certain ability enough number of times, or if you did a side quest, or some of them you just earn by progressing the story. But what these titles have is like they have 5 slots, each of them, and those 5 slots either have an ability, a passive buff, or a stat increase, and I think maybe a couple other things. But what I love about this is that it gives you so much freedom as to how you want to level up your characters, because you have to equip it, and then the more skill points you get, the more it levels up that title, and then you earn those bonuses or those abilities. So you have like complete control. It's like, well, I want to learn this move now. Or like, oh, I want to start focusing on my strength stats. So I'm gonna equip this. I'm gonna level this up. It's one of my favorites because it gives you so much freedom as to how you want to progress your characters and how you grow your team. So and that's the kind of stuff I like. It gives you this immense sense of like liberation and freedom, and how powerful your team is, and not just powerful, but just like the way you want them to be. It's great. So we've been talking a lot about like skill trees, but let's bring it back. Okay. I think a flawed masterpiece, don't laugh, is Deadly Premonition.
I'm not laughing.
I love that game. It is dumb. It is just a technical nightmare. But I love that game because it has so much heart. Like you could feel Swery, like, you know, in the office going nuts about this game, just being like, oh, this is awesome. And obviously, I don't think it's like obviously a masterpiece in like the more traditional sense, but I do feel
the real sense.
What?
The real sense.
But I do think it is in kind of its own weird way, just because it feels like this pure, unfiltered vision of wackiness, and it's so endearing and it's so dumb, but in such a unique way that to me it is the flawed masterpiece in my heart.
That's the Twin Peaks-esque game everyone was talking about.
Yes,
the one people said was like Twin Peaks, right?
Yes, it's not as well written as Twin Peaks, but it is very heavily inspired by Twin Peaks to the point.
See, I haven't played Deadly Premonition.
Okay.
From what I heard about it, it's extremely flawed.
It definitely is.
Like, to the point where it might not actually count as a masterpiece. I get why people love it, because I also love these really terrible B-movies that are, you know, so bad it's good. But I think there are legitimate games out there that have that do one thing really, really well and fail at the rest. But the one thing they do well is enough to actually carry it, like to make it way more memorable to me than most of the releases that come out in a year, especially the high profile ones.
Yeah, what
I mean, the games that I keep going back to, for example, is something like The Witness.
Okay. I haven't played it.
The Witness is a really specific puzzle game where you do one thing over and over. But it's... I mean, if you don't like what you're doing in that game, you're going to hate it, and a lot of people hate it. But a lot of people also love it because when you actually get into it, it's... I don't know, it's innovative and laid out in a way that is so just an open world puzzle game where you walk around the island and actually pick up on clues and hints on how to solve certain puzzle combinations, you know? without anything telling you, like there's no dialogue, there's no tutorial, nothing. You look at these puzzles, you try to figure them out, and if you can't, you just go somewhere else to another area and try your luck there.
Well,
and it's...
I don't mean to cut you off, but it started making me think, though, okay, so how do we define what a masterpiece is? Because I feel like it's a term that like a lot of people like to throw around, but it's never really clearly defined. And it seems to be just kind of up to the individual to a certain extent. Even though there's kind of like a general idea of like what it's supposed to be.
I don't think we can get a good definition which does not use some subjective standards, but I think a good way to describe a masterpiece is something that, I don't know, something that excels at something so good that it, I don't know, raises the standards for everything else. But then that's not really relevant to the way we're using it in this discussion.
Well, like because you're saying like, oh, it raises the standard or something like that. That sounds like a game that would be more like evolutionary or revolutionary, which, you know, you could argue that Ocarina of Time was like very revolutionary for its time, but it hasn't stood the test of time in my opinion. It's still a pretty decent game, don't get me wrong, but while people may have called it a masterpiece at the time, I wouldn't nowadays.
Well, I'm going through the Wikipedia here right now. Well, a masterpiece, another way to talk about it is that it's sort of like the pinnacle of its genre. Like, here's what it's set out to do, and it is the pinnacle of it. It is of such high quality that it is, like, in bold letters on the person's bibliography, this is the masterpiece. It is defining that person's it defines the people who worked on it, defines its era, and it is just beyond everything else in that thing.
See, for me, though, wouldn't... Like, if we're talking about the individual, wouldn't that make it their magnum opus? Because that's more specific to, like, that person.
Magnum opus is Latin for great work, which... I'm reading this on Wikipedia, by the way. Which, like, masterpiece, it has magnum opus on the Wikipedia side, so...
So they're kind of the same thing?
Yeah, it can be used interchangeably.
Okay. Because I always, always internalized
magnum opus is something that comes from the author, right? Sorry.
No, I was just saying, like, I've always internalized, like, magnum opus as, like, it is that auteur's, like, ultimate vision. Whereas, like, a masterpiece is, like, not necessarily divorced from their creative, but, like, it kind of just stands on its own as, like, it's just this masterwork.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to talk about it. It's just like a masterwork. If this is what you want, this is it. Like if you look at this
stands at the top of the genre.
Yeah.
Which is why for a lot of indie games, I feel comfortable talking about masterpieces, because I think in what The Witness, for example, tries to do, it achieves that in pretty much, well, maybe not perfection, but there's nothing else like it. So it stands atop of that discussion. But it's just, a small game in a niche genre that not really many game studios are trying to even compete with that. Whereas the AAA games that are coming out recently are all relatively samey, and they're trying to find that little twist on the formula that all the other games have too, that makes it slightly better. But they're still competing for the same price, if it makes sense.
And they just refine those elements that are shared across all genres. They refine them to a mirror sheen.
Yeah.
See, my only problem with this idea that like it's like at the top of its genre is that's assuming that whoever is making that judgment call has played or has experienced so much of that genre that they can say that. And I don't know how anyone would be able to reasonably do that, given how much of, like, even like puzzle genre, for example, like that's a genre that probably doesn't get too many releases, but even then, if someone devotes themselves to just puzzle games for like a good chunk of their life, like no, first of all, no one would do that. Like, I'm pretty sure like most people wouldn't do that. But like, I don't. It just seems unfair to me to say like, oh yeah, this is at the top of its genre. Well, can you really say that? Have you played enough in the genre to make that judgment call? It just seems a bit strange to me.
Yeah, exactly. You need to compartmentalize a lot to say The Witness is the best puzzle game when it comes to these specific kinds of slide puzzles, because there's no other game that even uses that. Or Fury is the best isometric neon boss rush game.
It's the only one.
Exactly.
Like,
but it's so fucking good, and because it is so unique, and because I haven't played anything like it since or before, and I can't even find anything like it right now. That's what makes it so important.
Does that mean that Catherine is a masterpiece of box puzzles?
Okay, I think I have this.
Okay.
And this is the part of the podcast series we all dreaded. I'm going to bring up Dark Souls.
Ah! Okay.
Okay, what if a masterpiece is just something that is better than all the sum of its parts? See, no, I don't think anybody really plays Dark Souls for the difficulty. I think there is an experience to it, which you can't really describe. You just sort of have to play it.
Yeah, and I would also say that, like, nobody plays Dark Souls, or any Souls games for that matter, specifically for the combat.
No. I don't hate a lot of people hate that combat. I think it's fine, but they could do without it. There's something else to him. There's this ethereal sort of journey, and you can't really get it. You can't really pinpoint it on any one of its elements. Would that be what a masterpiece could be? Something which transcends?
I think that makes sense insofar that a lot of the games that I think are memorable masterpieces are games that other people who aren't as into those games come up to me and tell me, the game is fine, but I hated this element and this element and this element. And I go, I understand why you would hate that, but for me, what it does well is way more important than the little flaws it has. Mm. So it is bigger than the sum of its parts. Like something like Snake Pass is also a game I bring up all the time. There is no other like snake simulating collectathon out there, so it stands as a you like the sum of its parts is that it's entirely unique and can't be compared to anything else.
What about Undertale though? Because I feel like you could say, well, that's like strongly inspired by the Mother series, but like that's a game that a lot of people feel comfortable saying, yeah, that's a masterpiece.
Yeah, well, I would put it down to the experience you're going into it with. Like, I don't think you can say, well, it's a masterpiece of this sort of puzzle solving, because nobody plays a puzzle, like, you know what I mean? You said Catherine is a masterpiece of what? Box puzzles?
Well, I was being a bit facetious when I said that.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, that's not what Catherine is about.
No.
Right, so it wouldn't be fair to say it's a like that is not the barometer of like you don't use that to measure the quality of the game. You use that thing which is about to measure it, and all other little elements in the game, if they don't break or ruin the thing the game is really trying to do, then you can sort of just go through them. Like, probably Dark Souls has some elements, like the entire second half, some would say, which sort of distract from the idea of this going through this sort of dark journey, but the journey itself and the things you get out of that journey are so much better than those distractions.
See, this is why Deadly Premonition is the true masterpiece, because its flaws turn around and make the game more enjoyable, because it adds to the cheesiness and the campiness and the brokenness.
What you're saying is it is the most flawed of all the most flawed masterpieces.
It is.
No, of all the flawed masterpieces.
I think there's a lyric in a Nirvana song where it's like, I'm 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 the worst at what I do best, or something like that. And that's Deadly Premonition. Yeah, that game is special. That's why it's the best.
I wish I had played it. Contribute to the
Do
conversation.
Do it. It's so good.
I feel like that's a game that'll put some virus in my console if I download it.
If you're gonna play it, you should probably play the PS3 version, or maybe the PC version. I haven't played the PC version myself. I have heard that it's a little broken, but I don't know if they fixed it by now. But the PS3 version is probably the least bad version.
Okay.
Hmm.
I'm gonna play Obra. What did you say it was? Obra Dinn?
Return of the Obra Dinn.
Yeah, I'm gonna play both of those now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
So
try
we do
that too.
have a somewhat, like, we have some ideas for a definition for a masterpiece, even a flawed masterpiece. So what do we define as a polished turd?
David Cage games. No, the way
Are those games polished?
Yeah, they have.
Have you seen Detroit? Like,
Detroit looks good, sure, but everything before...
fucking dude, Beyond Two Souls. Have you seen that game?
People
I
talked
have.
about Heavy Rain like it was the second coming of Jesus Christ back in the days because
Yes.
it looks photoreal.
Okay, it did at the time, but I recently went through it, and oh my god, it has aged so bad. Beyond Two Souls has aged better than you would think. It's actually aged pretty well. Heavy Rain has not aged well at all in terms of the visuals. It is an ugly game.
Yeah.
Every character sort of just lumbers, and their faces sometimes just freeze while they're. It's such a stupid game.
But see, I'm not sure, like, David Cage games actually fall into that territory. I think those are auteur-driven games.
Yes, they are.
They are fairly unique, and they aren't safe.
Yeah, but
They're still terrible.
Yeah, but I don't think you need to be safe to be to not be a masterpiece. I think the polished turd is just the thing at its core isn't very engaging or isn't very good, but all the packaging surrounding it is of a very high quality. I don't think his games are particularly good, but the visuals wouldn't, like, if you only watch the visuals, you might think, oh, this must be good. Whereas something like L.A. Noire would probably... that game would definitely fit into one of our categories.
Here's kind of how I see it. I feel like flawed masterpieces have a human touch to them, while like a polished turd, obviously they're made by people, but they give the impression that they were like fabricated or like assembled by a machine.
Yeah. Or they're just made to like fill somebody's ego.
Like a daikatana.
Yes.
Well, that wasn't polished.
I guess. I mean, people say about David Cage games that the movement is terrible. And that's basically everything there is in terms of gameplay.
Well, I mean, in Heavy Rain, you have to hold down R2 to walk. Ugh.
See, I never actually played them. I just watched LPs of pretty much all of them except Omicron.
I beat Heavy Rain twice.
Why? Why would you do that?
Because I played it when it released, and at the time, I was suckered in. Like, yeah, at the time when I first beat it, because like, I thought it was actually good, and it wasn't until later on when I started realizing, like, holy crap, this game's a friggin' mess. Because at the time, I wasn't as critical about like storytelling and writing, and it wasn't until especially recently when I went through it again, and I was just like, oh my god, what is this? How could I have not seen all of these glaring problems with the writing? This is terrible. But at the time I was also like, oh, it's just so new and different. Like I had never played anything like that. So it was also, I think people went through like a similar effect with Resident Evil, where like the newness of Resident Evil was also part of what made that game like so revolutionary for its time, because it was like, I mean, we know now that it was very heavily inspired by like Alone in the Dark, but like nobody played that game. So when Resident Evil came out, like it was so different, it was so unique that people kind of looked over some of its flaws. Not to say that Heavy Rain and Resident Evil are comparable, because Resident Evil is definitely a way better game, but just this idea of like something is so new and so different, just like it makes it easier to look over what's wrong with it.
So you would say Resident Evil 1 is a flawed masterpiece and Resident Evil 6 is a polished turd?
That would be fair.
Yeah. Another instance.
Resident Evil 6 is such a turd. That game is bad. You were saying something, Acer?
Yeah, another instance of the sort of, oh, it's new, and I feel like it's good. Another, like, what's that? That must be a syndrome, because it happens so often where people just double down. And this is actually another, I would say, polished turd, is BioShock Infinite. Did you guys play that?
Oh, God, fuck that game to hell.
Okay,
but
I have it on my Steam, but I haven't played it.
It has such good visual design, and there's so many, like, oh, this enemy design is really interesting, and you go into the sketchbook and they're like talking about this, and you go like, oh wow, there was like a creative passion behind this game, and then it was that like there was a producer who came in to control the budget, who just kind of killed everything, which is why that game is such a mess. But it's so polished for being such nothing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's all production value, nothing of substance whatsoever.
Yeah. People should Google like pictures from the art book, the what's it called? I don't know. I don't remember. Just look at the behind the scenes stuff on that game. Don't play it.
All right. I think we've taken this topic to its conclusion. So, do you guys want to talk about some of your more recent videos?
I heard you made a video recently.
Yes, I did actually.
That should be the most recent one.
Yes, it is. So I don't know if any of you guys watched it yet, but
I did.
Cool.
It was really good.
Oh, thank you. So for those who haven't seen it yet, I made a video called Finding Meaning in Shadow of the Colossus, and I need to thank Boken for the title. He's the one who came up with it. And basically, quick rundown, I try to reveal what I feel is like the game's thematic core and what the message is like that it's trying to convey to the player. Because I always felt that whenever I played Shadow of the Colossus, that like there's like, it felt like a very focused game, and it was trying very hard to try and get across something specific to the player. But I've never heard anyone talk about this, so I was like, I'll just make a video about it. So I'm glad to hear that you guys liked it. Do you have anything to say about it?
I'm disappointed you didn't use one of my name suggestions.
What was your name suggestion?
It was all the dumb ones. It was like, what you never knew about Shadow of the Colossus.
With the arrow pointing at Wander's crotch.
Yes. Yes. And like little emojis on the screen where they're like, oh my god.
I have like Agro the horse, and there's like a shock face next to it.
There's a shock face over it.
Dude, I honestly don't even remember coming up with that name. Was it really me?
Yes, it was you.
Huh.
Because like I was I wasn't sure what to name it, and I think I had something like Obsession and Shadow of the Colossus, something like that. And I was like, I think that's a little too on the nose. And then you came up with that, and I'm like, that's way fucking better. I've always had a hard time coming up with names for my videos.
Me too, man. It's one of the hardest parts because it also has to be something that's short and that makes sense in terms of, search engine optimization and hashtags and all that shit. Like, people have to actually look for that title, but you also want it to be good and not too on the nose. But the more on the nose it is, the more people actually look for it.
Yeah, it's like a weird balance you have to strike. But yeah,
Shadow of the Colossus, Elsa, Frozen, Minnie Mouse, Spider-Man. Remember those videos?
Oh God, yes. Those were the worst. But yeah, I know that Acer also made a Metal Gear Solid commentary video.
It's been a while since I did that, though. A few months.
Yeah, but still, that's your most recent one, right?
Yeah.
I think it's great.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think that you ramble a little bit at certain points, but like, it was still very entertaining.
Yeah, I promised I'd do Metal Gear Solid 2 next. My man, I'm so depleted of energy.
I was gonna say, like, are you sure that was a good idea?
This channel is killing you.
Also, like, that's a 9-hour game.
Yeah, Metal Gear Solid 1 is way shorter.
Yeah. Yeah, Metal Gear Solid 2 is 9 hours if you cut it.
But you are determined to do a commentary. Like, not an actual video, but a commentary video.
Like, I don't know why I keep doing it. Just make regular videos. No, I'm probably going to do something different. I want to do something with Chrono Trigger, but I don't know where I can play it. It's not on PC.
Yeah, it is.
Is it?
There's the Steam version.
Wow. I'm so stupid.
Yeah, that when that version first released, everyone poo-pooed it, but they kept like patching it and patching it and patching it, and now it's at like a pretty reasonable state.
Okay, so it's not a mess. It's playable.
It was upon release, but now it's fine because when they first released it, because it was just a straight port of the mobile version, and people like recoiled in disgust at like, what the hell is this? They slathered a smoothing filter on it. They just the menu looked like it was made for a touch screen. Like, people were just like vomiting all over the place. And Square, realizing this is one of their most beloved games, they really should fix this. So they did, thankfully, and now it's in a much better place.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll probably make a video on that then.
Cool beans. I kind of feel you though on this, like, on the idea of wanting to make a video on something, but you're not like quite sure what to do. Like, I want to make certain videos on certain things, and I'm just like, I want to because I like it, and I feel like I should have something to say about it, but nothing immediately jumps out as like, this is a topic.
This is something people would probably want to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. But also, I'll move on to that. Boken.
Yes.
Have you been making any videos behind our backs?
Unfortunately not. I still got somewhat finished script. Like, the first draft is done. And then I played a bunch of games for context, and now I would have to reincorporate my new knowledge into the script. But honestly, right now, I'm not doing anything for the channel. I'm mostly focused on playing Street Fighter. I mean, seriously, like, trying to learn that game competitively. Going to local sessions, preparing to go to tournaments, watching tournaments, all that shit. that costs most of my energy and time.
See, you should have made a video on that, like an hour, 2-hour documentary about like the journey to Street Fighter Pro.
I was honestly thinking about it, just making a video about how much effort you have to put into just getting competitively good in one single fighting game. And it's just one fighting game.
I want to see that. Do it.
I'd watch that. Do it like in a documentary style.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but see, cool. that's not going to keep my channel afloat because there is one video I can make.
Ah, I see.
And then I plan to do that as an apology video when I go back to actually making videos. Like as the first one, and then I can start rolling out the rest.
A problem that I have personally is I have like actually I was complaining before like I couldn't come up with any ideas for like a certain thing, but I actually have too many ideas in general, and I just don't have the time to just sit down and flesh them all out. Like right now, I think my next video though will probably be if everything turns out okay. Will probably be about discussing the theme of free will versus determinism in Berserk.
Oh, I want to see that.
'Cause like that's like very clearly the thematic core of Berserk. Yet nobody's made a video about it. And I'm like, how is this possible? Like I looked it up and I'm like, nobody has done it. It's like you gotta be kidding me. So yeah, I've been rewatching the 97 anime to like research. Yeah, hopefully that turns out okay. If I make it, I think I will. I've already started on the script, so.
But would that only be about the 97 series?
Well, I feel like that's where the themes of free will versus determinism are like at their strongest.
Okay.
Like,
see, I've only seen the anime. I've never read any of the manga or of the chapters that come after that.
I have.
Super good.
I have, but that the Golden Age arc in particular like just resonates with me the most.
You didn't like it when they spent like 9 years on a boat or something?
I don't think I even read up to that point. Like, that's not to say like the stuff that comes after the Golden Age arc is bad. I'm not saying that at all. It's still really good. But just that the Golden Age in particular, just like, I feel really strongly for. Yeah. Is that it?
Yeah.
I think so.
I think we should wrap it up then. So, I want to thank my co-hosts for coming together and finally making this damn podcast. We've been trying to get this thing together for a while now, so it's good that we finally did. Just give yourselves a nice pat on the back. Before we go, we should all plug our stuff, plug in all those holes. So, Boken, tell us where we can find you.
You can find me on youtube.com/bokenjima. And also on Twitch. I've been doing 2 Twitch streams of me playing Street Fighter Ranked online. And I will probably do more.
Cool. Acer?
You can find me on YouTube, just Acer Aesthetics. Or you can find me on YuGiOh Pro, where you can be soundly bested by me. But, don't do that. No, you can find me on YouTube. Just Acer.
Cool.
Daniel?
Unfortunately, since I decided to change my name to Daniel Santos, when you type that in YouTube, you find a bunch of other dudes. So, yeah. So if you want to find me, you're gonna have to put Shintai reviews. I think that still works. God damn it! One of these days, I'll be big enough where I'll just like overshadow all the other Daniel Santoses on the platform. Screw you guys!
I don't know. This singer
blocking my shine.
This Daniel Santos guy has like 3.4 million views on a video here. Daniel Santos, despedida.
All right. That's it, everyone. I hope you enjoyed. Signing out.